Hello and welcome to the 8th Virtual History of 2021. I am happy to be here with everyone today on this beautiful Friday afternoon to present this virtual history presented by the Baltimore Architecture Foundation, Baltimore Heritage, and we are also partnering with the Baltimore Museum of Industry today. My name is Nathan Denny's and I am the Associate Director of the Baltimore Architecture Foundation. I am quickly going to just make a plug for next week's presentations. We have a lot of ground to cover today. First, thank you to everyone who donated to be with us. And I hope you can join us next week for a special presentation on the history of the Edgar Allan Poe House. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Gould, who is the Executive Director of the Neighborhood Design Center. And they've been working with local designers on this really fabulous project called Design for Distancing to look at ways that we can alter the public built environment to make it more safe for social distancing. And I'll let her explain more about the work. Take it away, Jennifer.
Thanks so much, Nathan. As Nathan mentioned, I'm Jen Gould. I'm the Executive Director of the Neighborhood Design Center. NDC is Baltimore and Maryland's Community Design Center. That means we're a nonprofit organization and we work with community-initiated projects that help bring reinvestment to low and moderate income communities in Baltimore City and Prince George's County primarily, but work statewide. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm gonna give a brief introduction to the program itself and then hand over the reins to three of the lead designers who helped work on the project: Kevin Day, Graham Coral Allen, and Heidi Thomas. So I'll be introducing them a little further later, but first let's just share a little bit about what Design for Distancing is. As we know, in March of 2020, all of our lives drastically changed. And one of the biggest challenges of the huge changes that came with COVID-19 were how would we get access to the main things that we needed in our daily life? How would we go about buying groceries, getting dinner, doing our laundry, getting our hair cut, when it wasn't safe to be inside together any longer? And so in addition to meeting our needs, we also needed to think about all of those businesses in our daily lives that we cherish, that if they go out of business during COVID, what are we going to do afterwards? We need to support those small businesses through this time period so that when we all get our vaccination and can go back to celebrating birthdays together, et cetera, those places are still there for us. And so Baltimore's prior mayor came up with an idea that he wanted to work with the Baltimore Development Corporation, which is a quasi-governmental agency that helps get development done in the city, to work with small business and invest $1.5 million. I think we could go to the next slide, Nathan. To do reinvestment in our small business districts so that we could all go visit those places still out of doors. And the idea that BDC, the Baltimore Development Corporation, came up with was to work with Neighborhood Design Center, the local small business districts, and architects and builders all over the city to come up with small pop-ups in those streets and sidewalks adjacent to our small business districts, where we could eat a meal outside, wait in line for the grocery store, understand how closely we should be walking to our nearest friend in that sidewalk, and do the things we need to do on a day-to-day basis safely. So the first step was we came up with a guidebook that shows anybody how to do this. So that way, not only were we going to do it in Baltimore ourselves, but we were going to share all the ideas that people were coming up with for how to do it. And we did a competition and we got over 160 entries over just a couple weeks. And we worked with public health officials and all the city agencies and small business people to choose 10 great ideas that we put into a guidebook. And anybody can download that and use it for their own business or their neighborhood business district at designfordistancing.org. And for example, just in the last month alone, that guidebook has been downloaded 4,000 times. There's been thousands of downloads of that book all over the world, and people all over the world are looking at that. So really that was like the mayor's gift back to the world was Baltimore has brilliant ideas and we can share that with the world. Next one, please, Nathan. So the next level was to partner all of Baltimore's great designers with the small business districts all over the city and come up with an idea that was particular to that place to meet their specific needs. So there you can see a map of all the places all over the city where we worked, from places that everybody from around the world when they visit Baltimore visits, to Fells Point, to places that are really our local treasures, like Holland's Market and Bel Air Edison. Next slide, please, Nathan. And the design teams came up with all of these great ideas for how to utilize spaces like sidewalks, parking lots, streets, so that we could come, say, pick up a meal, join together, perhaps, even meet our best friend who we haven't seen in months for a coffee and do that safely, to allow some space for our children to play. All those things that we might have done in our homes now need to take place, many of them in the public realm. And so these are just, this is Holland's Market, just showing you a couple of the interventions, and then we'll dive a little more deeply with the folks we have on screen with us today to talk about their projects. Nathan, one more. And this is the Pimlico project. You can see Mayor Scott there. He came out to a lot of the build days even before he was mayor and helped do the interventions. In Pimlico, they did a lot of sidewalk markings to draw attention to the spacing of, like, these are like little pod areas and signage and murals. So each neighborhood came up with a different thing for what they needed in their neighborhood. And the designers really just partnered, listened, heard what they needed, and came up with great ideas. So let's hear a little bit more about those ideas. First today, we're going to talk to Kevin Day. Kevin's a principal at a firm called Living Design Lab. Living Design Lab is a mission-driven architecture and urban planning firm that works with a variety of clients, groups, and institutions on community-centric projects of various types and scales. The firm applies a multidisciplinary and collaborative approach that goes beyond traditional boundaries of architecture to holistically solve social, economic, and environmental problems. Let's turn it over to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Jen. I appreciate it. So our project was located along Pennsylvania Avenue, primarily in the Upton area. So as you're looking at the map, on the right-hand side is Shake and Bake, all the way to the left, which is North Ave. And one thing that we learned very early on in working with Upton Planning Committee was the notion of, what is intended to be a temporary project. This notion of being temporary was a luxury in a neighborhood that really has not had a lot of investment. So from the get-go, it was important for us to think of ways that what we're constructing and doing could be leveraged by the community and used over time and moved around and reallocated. The other interesting thing about the site is it is in the Black Arts and Entertainment District. So the notion of art was hugely influential and integrated into the progress. Not only art being for art's sake, but really as a means of discourse and conveying ideas about the neighborhood. Next, please. So what we ended up doing was, we needed something that was quick and cost effective, durable and safe, but also modular, so it could be adapted over time. So we looked at, traditional concrete Jersey barriers, and what you see on the right is construction scaffolding, but we had to make it beautiful. Next, please. So what we did is we thought creatively about these elements. So what you see in front of you is one of the modules we designed. So what you see in yellow is the construction scaffolding. And it has, shelves and things for vendors to be able to conduct transactions. You see the glass on the right-hand side that, addresses some of the social distancing issues of point of sale. But what's really what this really becomes is really a canvas. So we have suggested some colorizations here. You see the scaffolding in yellow, there's shade cloth in red, but the idea really was that in working with MICA and Maryland State Art Council, that local artists would be engaged to actually create artwork on these surfaces. And those surfaces would change over time. Next, please. So here again, you see another module that was designed. You know, the concrete can be painted. It can be augmented with other elements. So here you see, you know, blue painted concrete Jersey barriers with some metal armatures that are placed on top to create socially distant areas where, you know, once you get some food, you can kind of stand or sit and enjoy them. And they're spaced in a socially distant manner as well. Next, please. But we know that you know, a big part of getting out and about, getting out of your house and seeing your friends is about the social aspect. So we didn't want to ignore that either. So one of the other modules, again created out of scaffolding, was, you know, something as simple as the type of swing that you might find on your porch, set up again in a modular fashion at socially distant spacing that you could really sit down in the shade when it gets warmer, and you know, just enjoy being outside, enjoy seeing other people, seeing the vibrance of the community, and maybe swinging next to a friend, all while being safe. Next, please. So you can begin to see how these things can be arranged in conjunction with painting the street to create nodes or centers of activity. So on the left, you can see in the parking lot beyond an array of some of these modules. Those happen to be vendor stalls and picnic tables at the Avenue Market. And the paint all kinds of ties it back to the main corridor of Penn Avenue. Next, please. And so you can start to see how these modules can be arranged in such a way that is safe, but also adds a lot of color and ability for the community to express itself. I think I have one more slide actually, and there's the last one. So another type of installation along a street where we're using the Jersey barriers to protect pedestrians from traffic, with the vendor stalls beyond. Thank you.
Great. Quick question, Kevin. If we're going out to Pennsylvania Avenue, when would we expect to actually be able to experience this? I know your project's just going in right now.
It is, given the scale of it and all of the different entities involved in getting some additional supplemental funds, we are actually mobilizing today, and we are starting to lay out actually on Monday at the Avenue. If you want to come see this start to go up, feel free to do it. I'm not sure when the community painting event is going to happen, but there will be a means of socially distant painting of some of the scaffolding as well.
Great, thanks so much. Next, we're going to hear from Graham Correll Allen from Graham Projects. Graham's the founder and principal. He makes cities more inclusive and livable through public art, placemaking, and civic engagement. Graham worked in Hamilton, Lauraville. So let's hear about that project next, Graham.
Thank you all very much. I had the honor of working with a team, including Property Consulting Incorporated, Annie Howe of Annie Howe Paper Cuts, and Kyle Lanning Smith of Lanning Smith Fabrication Studios, working in support of the merchants represented by the Hamilton Lauraville Main Street organization. Next slide, please. So in meeting with the merchants, we had a lot of suggestions and needs, but some of the two biggest ones were creating strong, improved traffic calming measures and pedestrian safety connections, as well as opportunities for conducting business outside with things such as outdoor seating. So this is Hartford Road, the 27 and the 2800 blocks. You can see what we're looking at are parking lanes, which we later converted into design for distancing spaces. You can also see a lack of marked crosswalks. Next slide, please. And so this is what it looked like after we installed. We set a new precedent in the city by requesting and effectively advocating for, designing, and then building a mid-block crosswalk. That's a big achievement and something we're really happy that DOT approved. This is at Rose Kemp and Harford Road. And so we have the MUTCD compliant continental style crosswalk that is framed with traffic calming bump outs, or those curb extensions, which are made with line striping and flex posts. Other accessibility features include modular ADA curb ramps, as well as protective barriers that we decorated with vinyl, and modular flexible barriers that can be sort of rearranged to help create a strong sense of place with landscaping, and repurposed food grade drums that we turned into potters. Next slide, please. Here's what the 2800 block looks like. So Fire and Rice is a new restaurant that's currently occupying a smaller space kind of right around the corner on Southern Avenue. They will be moving into the larger corner space at this new building and taking advantage of that large area, which used to be parking and a big turning space. And we've turned into a multi-function space that can have outdoor seating and events and in a protected and socially distanced way. Next slide, please. And here's some of the specific components that we used to program and make these spaces accommodating. So once again, we have the ADA curb ramp. We have wayfinding stencils that were designed by Annie Howe in response to specific amenities and businesses that exist. We have also outdoor seating in front of places like Zeke's Coffee House, as well as a long 8-foot benches with social distancing stencils in front of places like Dominican Star Salon. So people can wait outside to get their haircut. Next slide. And here's an example of what it looks like in action. This is on one of the Friday evening community gatherings where merchants stay open late. So Tortuga Gift Shop is out there, you know, families are coming around. We've got a young man who's selling his home brewed kombucha tea. And I think Zeke's Coffee House was also serving, had a pop-up pizza night then. So we had a lot of great activity. And that about covers it. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks so much, Graham. I know NDC's working with a Hopkins student to look at the impact of this project, and she was out talking to people and spoke with an older gentleman who was just enjoying a sunny day on one of the benches, and he said that he's lived his whole life on Rose Kemp and never expected to be able to sit out on Harford Road. And finally, we'll speak with Heidi Thomas, founder of Envirocollab. Envirocollab is a full-service landscape architecture, planning, and urban design studio in Baltimore, Maryland. Placemaking is her passion, and sustainable design, collaborative engagement, and community advocacy is her purpose.
I'll bring up the PDF in just a moment. Sorry, my Adobe crashed. So if you want to just introduce, we could start talking. It should be just a few seconds here. I'm sorry about that.
Sure. Thanks, Jen. So a little bit about our site. We are in Bel Air, Addison, which is kind of northeast of the city. And, you know, two things that were really kind of integral to this process, or that came out of the process of engaging with the community, the Main Street representatives, and fellow designers and fabricators on our team was this idea of expanding beyond more immediate site interventions and looking at addressing the whole corridor along Bel Air Road, because it's quite a busy traffic corridor. And one of the concerns that came up from the community is that they didn't want the design for distancing installations to feel too isolated and removed from each other, being 3 blocks away. And so we took a look at some of their existing branding in the community, and they have a lot of mosaic planters that currently line the corridor. And so taking inspiration from that, we worked with the community members to develop some corridor scale identity elements that would help visually connect the design for distancing interventions across the blocks. And so in a moment, when we have the slides up, you'll see that we have a series of vertical pylons that were branded with the community's name that are also seating elements, and that feature native plantings, because we heard a lot from folks that, you know, there was the desire to sort of green up the the urban environment a bit more. And then we implemented sidewalk and crosswalk muraling across the length of the corridor, again, to visually connect both ends where we had the site interventions, but also as an extension of the community's identity and their desire to express themselves through bold color and interactive pieces and identity elements. And then at the specific merchant locations, I believe we were working with 5 or 6 different business locations. Actually, some of those merchants were retailers. A couple were serving food and coffee, and we had a nonprofit organization, and then I believe 2 barbershops. So we had quite an interesting cross-section of merchants that we were working with. And so each of the needs of each of the merchants were quite different in terms of what they were looking to do through these interventions at their particular site. But given that the businesses were grouped together 3 and 3 across these 3 blocks, we were able to sort of come up with a family of structures, which here you see on this first page, and we can go ahead and go to the next page. So I'll talk a little bit more about those structures, but I just wanted to point out what I was talking about earlier with regard to the pylon elements and some of the sidewalk and crosswalk muraling. So we can jump to the next one. So these space frame elements, again, were designed to be modular systems that could be adaptable, adapted to different uses over time. And they are 2-sided elements that are separated by a plexiglass panel in the middle, so people could sit on opposite sides, still converse with one another and not necessarily have to worry about their masks. So we came up with an iteration of these that were applied at different sites based on the merchant's needs. Next slide. And so you can see how some of the community has already sort of, claimed some of these pieces and turned them into art elements and started using them for community events and to sell some of their retail items and to sit down and enjoy a nice cup of coffee. I think we have one more slide. Another feature of this installation was a parklet, which took up 2 parking spaces. The idea came out of the nonprofit community organization we were working with to develop a sprinkler park for children. So that became a fun kind of interactive, playful piece of this project.
Great. Thank you so much. It's so fun to hear you guys talk about your work. I mean, having gone through it all with you, but then to be on the other side of it and to hear how it actually operates is a treat for me too. These interventions came out of a crisis, which is also often a challenging time, but often also a time of innovation. As we look to emerging from the current crisis, what are the things that you think people are most excited about seeing continuing beyond that crisis time? And what changes would you like to see in Baltimore that allow for more of these sort of interventions?
I'd love to jump in here and just, speak to the inherently temporary nature of these installations, but hearing a real desire from the community to implement these types of things more in the long term. And I think an initiative like Design for Distancing showcases how effective these interventions can really be in helping merchants reclaim public space and helping us reshape the public realm and cater it more to pedestrians, where so much of it has been allocated to vehicles. So I'm hopeful that this is setting a precedent for more permanent reclamation of these spaces in the long term.
I think from an awareness aspect, I think getting people to think of infrastructure such as sidewalk and streets, kind of not as an afterthought or as a given, but as a resource, and being open to the idea of thinking differently and thinking very poignantly about how do you bring people together? How do you activate a space? To me, that was one of the most rewarding aspects of this. And I'm really hopeful that we as a city can think that way in the future with all projects, not just because of social distancing, but under the guise of how do we really allow and support our communities to thrive and interact outdoors.
And to build on all that, I think one of the things I would like to see going forward is an extension of the umbrella right of entry, which is this fancy term that the city says, you can go and do the work, it's okay. That made it very much easier for us to kind of do the installation. We didn't have to go through a full memorandum of understanding and permitting process. We were able to much more effectively do that in a fast way. And in my experience as an artist and advocate, it can be daunting for communities to navigate the city process for building things in public space. And so this speaks to, I think, the need for streamlining that process from kind of an administration and permitting approval side.
Great, thanks, Graham. We have a question from somebody with us today that maybe you could answer since it's a technical one. Will the street painting be maintained from wear and tear? How do you address the long-term use of something like those crosswalks, Graham?
So for the artistic crosswalks, we use an epoxy modified coating. It's not a paint, it's much more durable. And we're also introducing other types of more durable stuff that are basically equivalent to what they use in bus lanes and bike lanes. And so it's a similar type of product to that, except I can get it in fun colors. And it is very durable. If BG&E goes in and does a utility cut, then certainly we'll have to go in and recoat that. So I do keep an inventory of pigments to match all the projects.
Great, thanks so much. It was a moment where we wanted to be able to do these responses as quickly as we could because, our small businesses were at risk and we were also really challenged to meet our daily needs. What really attracted you guys to joining NDC in your city in this project?
For me, I think the thing that got our firm interested was a little bit of what Graham said, is it was an all hands on deck. There's a need and let's all work together to address this need. We saw that as an opportunity to really be innovative and, get work done without having to worry about a lot of the hangups that come with working through a governmental process.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think too, for us, just the opportunity to collaborate with so many different entities in such a compressed time frame, and we were all in it together, pushing it forward to see it built, and even down to coordinating those community volunteer days and rallying people around the installation of these things. It was just a very exciting collaborative process all the way through.
And I was definitely inspired to work with Neighborhood Design Center because y'all have done such great work over the years and have a great reputation in communities I've worked in across the city, but also obviously to meet the needs of merchants who are suffering due to COVID-19 losses, and including, my design build team. I lost several contracts, as did some of the other folks on our design build team. So this actually helped fill in some of the gaps in our revenue schedule. So that was, as a job creator, just in the process of doing it.
Yeah, those are inspiring stories. I'd like to know whether there's anybody joining us today in the audience who has a question they would like to ask of me or our designers. Just while you're typing in, maybe I'll ask each of the designers, did you learn anything about the place where you worked that you didn't know before? Because I know when I go in deep with the neighborhoods, I think I know and love Baltimore so well. But then when I spend day in and day out, it can be the tiniest things, like the shopkeeper at one place or little pieces of the neighborhood that I never slowed down enough to notice. Did you find out anything about the places that you worked?
So I think one of the big things that was a big takeaway of working with the community and Upton Planning Committee was how fast they could move. I think a lot of us think of, oh, well, we're going into community and this is going to be a slower process. But a lot of times I felt like we were holding up the process, and the ability to rally and connect with resources in a synergistic way was really mind-blowing to me.
I think for me, just, realizing that these merchants we were working with weren't just individual businesses trying to make it through a pandemic. They were a network of businesses trying to work together to help each other out and rally around this initiative and help support each other, which was amazing.
My favorite thing is always hearing comments from passersby talking about how nice it is, to be able to have some outdoor space to hang out in. And that was something that we suspected and was absolutely affirmed by countless residents and merchants who are now taking part in Harford Road.
Okay, I don't see any additional questions in the Q&A. If anybody's joining and has a question they would like to ask, you can type it into the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or otherwise I'll just take a final moment to thank everybody for sharing their day with us. You can learn more at designfordistancing.org. You can visit Google NDC or any of our firm names and learn more, and feel free to reach out to us with questions. Thanks so much to AIA Baltimore, Baltimore Heritage, and the Baltimore Museum of Industry, which I can't wait to take my kids back to once we're all out of this. Hope to see you soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.